Here's the problem: most of us give up too early. We fear rejection, we fear judgment, and we allow the world to write our story. But Steve Jobs teaches us how to flip the script, how to turn rejection into power, how to shape the narrative, and how to build something so great that it outlives us. That is the problem we are going to solve: how to stop living powerless and start living with unshakable conviction. Imagine this. You pour your entire life, your blood, your sweat, your soul into something. You build it with a vision that nobody else sees. You fight through sleepless nights, through doubt, through people laughing in your face. And then, one day, the very thing you created rejects you. That was my life in 1985. Apple wasn't just a company to me. It was my child, my identity, my masterpiece. I gave it everything. And yet, my own company turned its back on me. The boardroom, the executives, the people I thought were allies. They pushed me out. Do you know what that feels like? It feels like death. It feels like your entire existence is meaningless. Because when the world tells you no to the very thing you thought defined you, it breaks you in half. And most people stay broken. But here's the darkest truth about rejection. It is not your enemy. Rejection is your greatest teacher. It is a mirror showing you who you are without the applause, without the spotlight, without the comfort of being accepted. Rejection strips you naked, and it asks you one question: are you done, or are you dangerous? When I walked away from Apple, I was humiliated. Headlines around the world laughed. People whispered that I was finished, that I was a washed-up kid who got lucky once. Do you know what that does to your ego? It doesn't just bruise it, it crushes it. And yet, in that silence, in that humiliation, something happened. I became sharper. I became hungrier. Because when the world rejects you, you only have two choices. You either shrink into nothing, or you come back like fire. That fire is what created NXT. That fire is what rebuilt Pixar into a storytelling empire. And here's the irony. The very company that once rejected me, that laughed at me, that thought it had buried me, came crawling back. Apple needed me more than ever. Why? Because rejection turned me into something unstoppable. Here's what most people don't understand: rejection is not a wall, it is a weapon. If you learn to wield it, it cuts through fear, through doubt, through every voice that says you're not enough. But to wield it, you must first embrace the pain. Don't run from it. Don't numb it. Sit with it. Let it carve you. Because in that carving, you discover who you are. Think about your own life for a moment. How many times have you been told no? How many doors have slammed in your face? How many people didn't believe in your dream, your vision, your potential? And what did you do? Did you shrink? Did you walk away quietly? Or did you let that rejection burn so deep inside you that it forced you to rise again? The world doesn't reward the comfortable. It doesn't reward those who play it safe. It rewards those who take rejection and use it as fuel. Every great story you've ever heard, every great leader you've ever admired, every innovator who changed the world, they all faced rejection so brutal, it could have destroyed them. What made them different? They refused to stay broken. When Apple pushed me out, I could have disappeared. I had the money, the success, the reputation. I could have lived quietly, comfortably. But comfort kills greatness. And so I chose the opposite. I chose to build again, to fight again, to put myself on the line knowing I could fail again. That decision, born out of rejection, created the greatest comeback story in business history. Rejection is a filter. It separates the dreamers from the doers. It asks, how badly do you want it? And most people don't want it badly enough. But those who do, they rise from rejection like steel forged in fire. You must remember this: rejection doesn't define you. Your response does. When the world says you're not ready, when people laugh at your ideas, when you feel abandoned by the very thing you gave your heart to, That is the moment of power. That is the moment you get to choose. Will you give up or will you get dangerous? I chose dangerous. And that choice is the reason you carry a piece of my vision in your pocket right now. That choice is the reason my name is remembered. Not because I avoided rejection, but because I embraced it and I turned it into power. Reality is a strange thing. Most people believe it is fixed, unshakable, something you cannot bend. But the truth is, reality is only perception. And perception belongs to the storyteller. The one who controls the story controls the world. When I walked onto a stage to launch a product, I wasn't selling a piece of metal, plastic, or glass. I wasn't even selling technology. I was selling belief. I was selling the idea that this little object in your hand wasn't just a tool. It was the future. People don't buy products. People buy stories. And the one who shapes that story becomes powerful beyond measure. I knew this from the very beginning. When we launched the Macintosh in 1984, the product itself was remarkable, yes. But what people remember, what sent chills through an entire generation, wasn't the hardware. It was the story. The 1984 commercial. A hammer smashing conformity. A young woman shattering the screen of oppression. We weren't just launching a computer, we were declaring a revolution. And here's the truth that most people don't want to hear. Revolutions aren't about facts or logic or features. Revolutions are about emotion. They are about shaping the way people feel, shaping the way they see the world. Because once you capture perception, reality follows. Think about the iPod. There were already MP3 players on the market. Many of them had more features, more buttons, more storage. But nobody cared because they didn't have a story. They talked about gigabytes, about technical specifications, about numbers nobody remembered. What did we say? 1,000 songs in your pocket. That's it. That was the story. And people believed it because they could feel it. The dangerous mistake most people make in life, in business, in leadership, is thinking that truth alone will carry them. It won't. Truth without narrative is invisible. You can have the best product, the most brilliant idea, the most revolutionary invention. But if you cannot tell the story, if you cannot shape perception, then you don't matter. You will be forgotten. And make no mistake, if you don't control your story, someone else will. When I was fired from Apple, the headlines weren't written by me. They were written by people who wanted to see me as a failure, a reckless kid who had flown too close to the sun. For a moment, the world believed that story. But I refused to let that be my truth. I refused to let others write the narrative of my life. That is why I built again. That is why I came back. Because if you don't seize control of your narrative, you will always live inside the story someone else has written for you. So ask yourself, what is the story you are telling the world about yourself? Do people see you as weak, as average, as replaceable? Or do they see you as someone who bends reality, someone who demands to be remembered? That story is not written by accident. It is written by every word you speak, every action you take, every time you step into the world. The art of power is not in shouting louder. It's not about forcing people to listen. The art of power is in shaping the story so deeply, so clearly, that people choose to listen, that they choose to believe, that they choose to follow. When I stood on stage and held up the first iPhone, it wasn't just a product launch. It was a moment of storytelling. I told people this was not 3 devices. It wasn't a phone, an iPod, or an internet communicator. It was one device. And that framing, that story, made the world stop. It shifted the way people thought about technology forever. What I want you to understand is this power doesn't belong to the loudest person in the room. Power belongs to the one who tells the best story, the one who can make people believe something before it exists, the one who can take a dream, invisible and fragile, and make the world see it as inevitable. That is the dark lesson most people miss. If you cannot control the narrative, you will be controlled. If you do not define who you are, the world will do it for you. And the world is not kind. The world is not generous. The world is not waiting to hand you a legacy. You must write it. You must speak it. You must live it until it becomes undeniable. And once people believe your story, once they see the world through your lens, then reality bends. Because reality doesn't belong to those who wait. It belongs to those who dare to tell the story first. Simplicity. Everyone talks about it, but almost no one understands it. People think simplicity is easy. They think it's soft, gentle, obvious. But the truth is, simplicity is war. It is the most ruthless act of discipline you will ever face. When I looked at Apple, when I looked at our products, I saw one thing over and over again. Complexity. Complexity is seductive. It makes you feel smart. It makes you feel like you're doing more, offering more, being more. But complexity is a weakness. Complexity is what drowns people in noise, in clutter, in distraction. Simplicity is what cuts through. Simplicity is clarity. Simplicity is truth. And the pursuit of simplicity is not kind. It is merciless. When we designed the first Macintosh, I didn't want a machine that looked like every other boring box on the market. I didn't want rows of confusing buttons and manuals thicker than a Bible. I wanted a computer that was so simple a child could use it. But to get there, we had to say no. We had to strip away, cut, sacrifice, and fight for clarity. And here's the part no one tells you. Simplicity is not about adding less. It's about removing more. Removing until only the essential remains. Do you know how hard it is to say no? To look at something beautiful, something that took months of work, and still kill it because it doesn't serve the vision. Most people can't do it. They get attached. They fall in love with their own ideas, their own cleverness. But greatness doesn't come from attachment. It comes from ruthlessness. I fired people not because they weren't smart, but because they didn't understand this discipline. They wanted to add, I wanted to subtract. They wanted options, I wanted clarity. And that difference is what separates good from great. Think about the iPod. Before Apple, music players were clunky, bloated with features, endless menace, and useless complexity. We took all of that noise and we stripped it down to a wheel. One screen. One idea, 1,000 songs in your pocket. That was simplicity. And that simplicity changed the world. But simplicity doesn't just apply to products. It applies to life, to leadership, to power itself. When you know what matters most, everything else becomes noise. Most people fail not because they lack talent, but because they drown in distraction. They say yes to everything, and in saying yes to everything, they dilute themselves until nothing remains. Saying yes is easy. Saying no is the hardest skill you will ever master. At Apple, I would walk into meetings and cross out entire projects with a single stroke. Not because they were bad ideas, but because they weren't the idea. People hated me for it. They thought I was cruel, arrogant, impossible to please. But that's the price of simplicity. It demands sacrifice. It demands you cut away not only the distractions, but sometimes even the good things, to make room for the great things. This is why simplicity is ruthless. It doesn't care about your feelings. It doesn't care about your comfort. It doesn't care about how much work you've already put in. Simplicity only asks one question: does this serve the vision? If the answer is no, it must go. And here's the paradox. Simplicity looks easy only after it's done. People look at the iPhone and think, of course it should look like that. They don't see the years of fighting, cutting, saying no, rejecting, and stripping down until the design became inevitable. Simplicity is invisible work. It is the thousands of battles no one ever sees. But once you achieve it, it is unstoppable. Simplicity doesn't compete, it dominates. When something is truly simple, it becomes undeniable, unforgettable, almost eternal. That's why our products didn't just sell. They redefined entire industries. Because once people taste true simplicity, they never go back. And maybe the most dangerous lesson of all is this: simplicity is not democratic. You cannot design by committee. You cannot lead by consensus. Consensus breeds compromise, and compromise breeds mediocrity. To pursue simplicity, you must be willing to stand alone. You must be willing to say no when everyone else says yes. You must be willing to be hated in the short term, to be proven right in the long term. That's the price of clarity. That's the price of cutting through the noise. That's the price of being ruthless enough to demand simplicity when the world is drowning in complexity. Obsession. That word scares people. They think obsession is unhealthy, dangerous, and destructive. And maybe they're right. But here's the truth: no one wants to admit every legacy, every revolution, every dent in the universe has been built by obsession. Comfort never changed the world. Balance never built greatness. Obsession did. When I was building Apple, I didn't care about being liked. I didn't care about being comfortable. I didn't even care about being rich. I cared about one thing: creating something so extraordinary that it would outlive me. That kind of vision doesn't come from curiosity, interest, or a hobby. It comes from obsession. From waking up in the middle of the night thinking about pixels, fonts, materials, and colors. From being unable to sleep until you solve a design problem no one else even noticed. From caring about the invisible details that most people would call insane. I would walk into meetings and obsess over the curve of a button, the spacing of icons, the sound a device made when you tapped it. Engineers would roll their eyes. Designers would get frustrated. But I didn't care. Because obsession is not about pleasing people. It's about demanding perfection when the world is happy with good enough. And the world will always try to seduce you with good enough. That's why obsession is dangerous. Because it refuses to compromise. The truth is, obsession costs you. It will take your comfort, your time, your relationships, maybe even your peace of mind. But that cost is the price of immortality. People will forget your money. They will forget your titles. They will forget your status. But they will never forget the thing you created, the thing that carries your fingerprints, the thing that outlives you. Think about it. Why do people line up overnight for a phone, a piece of glass and metal? Why do they treat it as more than a device? It's not because of features. It's because of obsession. They feel the fingerprints of someone who refused to compromise. They feel the weight of decisions that were fought over, refined, and perfected. That's why it matters. That's why it lasts. When we built the iPhone, it wasn't about making a phone. It was about reshaping the way people lived, the way they connected, the way they experienced the world. That doesn't come from a business plan. That doesn't come from a marketing meeting. That comes from obsession. The relentless belief that the world deserves something better, and the refusal to stop until it exists. Most people dabble. They dip their toes in. They try. They experiment. But the moment it gets hard, the moment it demands sacrifice, they quit. Obsession doesn't quit. Obsession doesn't rest. Obsession eats at you until the thing you imagine becomes real. And here's the paradox. Obsession looks insane in the present, but it looks inevitable in the future. People called me crazy when I said we would put 1,000 songs in your pocket. They called me delusional when I said a phone could change the way humans lived. They laughed at the idea of a glass screen without buttons. But now, those same ideas are part of everyday life. That's the power of obsession. It turns insanity into inevitability. But obsession is lonely. Don't think for a second it's glamorous. Most of the time, it feels like walking through fire alone. People won't understand you. They'll call you difficult, arrogant, impossible. They'll tell you to slow down, to relax, to be realistic. But if you want to build something that outlives you, you cannot listen to them. You have to stay hungry even when you're exhausted. You have to stay foolish even when the world demands you grow up. You have to cling to your obsession even when it feels like it's tearing you apart. Because here's the truth. Obsession is the only thing strong enough to fight against mediocrity. The world is drowning in average. Everywhere you look, people settle. They settle for jobs. They settle for relationships. They settle for products. They settle for lives that don't set their soul on fire. Obsession is the antidote. Obsession is the refusal to settle. Obsession is the fire that burns everything average to the ground. And if you let it consume you, if you let it guide you, if you let it push you past every limit you thought you had, obsession will give you something comfort never could: a legacy, a chance to be remembered, a chance to carve your name into history, not because you lived, but because you built something that will live long after you're gone. Power is not what people think it is. It's not money. It's not titles. It's not the applause of the crowd. Real power is rejection turned into fire. Real power is owning the story before someone else writes it for you. Real power is cutting away everything that does not serve the vision, no matter how much it hurts. And real power is obsession. An obsession so relentless that it outlives your body, your name, your time. Most people will never taste this kind of power because it's uncomfortable, it's lonely, it's brutal. But that is the price. That is the path. That is the choice. You can live safely. You can live comfortably. You can live balanced. And you will be forgotten. Or you can embrace rejection. You can shape the narrative. You can strip life down to the essential. And you can give yourself over to obsession. And then, maybe then, you will build something that leaves a scar on history. Because in the end, power isn't about control. It isn't about domination. Power is about legacy. And the darkest truth of all is this: only those willing to bleed for their vision ever leave one.